There's an old adage in American football that applies to other sports as well that defense wins championships. And what they mean is that defense wins championship games, which is really just saying that defense wins games. There's a lot that's different, to be sure, between American football, other sports, and hell let loose. But there is an analogous situation in this game. What follows here is my recommendation for pub play, better pub play. And I have warfare mode in mind, since on offensive mode, your choices really are already made for you. You're either attacking or you're all defending, and there's no sort of division of labor between squads. What I have in mind and what follows is probably not a good idea for a squad of all new players. Conceivably, if you all watched this video, talked it through, planned it out, it would work, but that's not how pub play works. What I have in mind is a group of folks who play frequently together, might be in a clan, a group of friends who communicate, play well with one another, that they can divide up the tasks, know what each has to do. There's no questioning of orders, all that other stuff. So there's the possibility you might get a random kind of squad composition of enough guys who are good enough team players that you could probably do this, but I think it's going to be challenging to do. Why play defense at all? Well, the game incentivizes, in warfare mode, both sides to play at least some defense, because one attacker versus no defenders is a recipe for a capture for the attackers. Whereas with the rest of the folks in that 50-man server, the 50 attackers against the side that's about to get capped are in no ways guaranteed to actually cap against 49 defenders because of casualties, the time it takes to travel, keeping up forward respawn points, and so on. In warfare mode, if we're looking at two squads that are relatively close on balance of all the things that can affect a hell let loose match, both sides are going to be attacking and usually defending simultaneously. If your side is all in on the attack, most of the time you're going to lose, in my experience, except for when the two sides happen to be so unevenly matched that you can get away with that kind of play. Why don't people defend? I have no idea. I can give you some conjecture. It's not really why you're here, but it might have to do something with a conflation between the words defensive and passive. Nobody wants to be passive. It's usually a recipe for disaster in this kind of a game. And a good defending squad in Hell Let Loose knows that it is active all the time, and probably at least as active as any of the attacking squads, if not more. It's also possible that folks have played with other commanders or squad leads and treated defense as a passive and boring exercise, and so they made it a boring exercise and nobody wants to do it again. And by that kind of passive defense, sitting around in the hard cap waiting to get hit with a bombing run and artillery, your team probably got steamrolled. And so it's reasonable that especially newer players, but not just them, they don't think highly of playing defense, probably because it hasn't been taught well, or they haven't had a good experience with it in the past, and they're not in the game to be bored. So people don't want to be bored. Some defense is necessary, assuming that the other side is always going to be throwing some offense at you. And once they get more attackers back than you have defenders, you're going to be in trouble. The hard cap can help, as you know, and I'm kind of assuming that you know something about the game. You should probably read that great manual that came out a couple months back. But being in the hard cap on warfare mode will give 3 times the cap weight. So a few defenders can hold off a relatively large number of attackers, at least from capping that defensive cap. Although if the firefight goes on without reinforcements, they're likely going to get wiped. Then the attackers will be in the hard cap, and the defender's life is going to get much more difficult. So we need some defense. and it needs to be an active defense. What I want to talk about for the remainder of this is some practical advice, kind of what can you do specifically if you're going to take on that necessary role of the defending squad. So the first one of those kind of brass tacks suggestions I can make is think about your squad composition considerations and make sure everyone in the squad understands their responsibilities in their role, and also that they may have to switch roles if only to help things out here. I understand that some of the things I'm going to recommend dovetail with what some people call a logistical squad. Yeah, I mean that's true, and that's because some of the roles that you can use that are good at defending a point can also tie closely to logistics. And the point is, you want to be active. You don't want folks who are just sitting around waiting for some enemy to possibly run in front of them. That can work in some cases, but you don't want most or all the squad to be doing that. If you can do things that are productive and push your whole team forward, then they ought to be doing those things. You obviously got to have a squad lead.
I'm going to hammer this man.
They are the communication node that lets the ground level squad folks know what command chat wants them to do, what they're seeing. It's the squad lead who has the capability to mark maps and also to request right to HQ things that the squad might need. That makes a little bit more sense. Squad lead is not about being mean or being bossy, although direction is good for those who don't need it. Again, I'm assuming a kind of higher than your average quality squad for these kind of recommendations. So there's going to have to be some economy of talking. Some, but not too much, so that folks can listen, you can hear from other folks, and I can tell you that one of the toughest things as a squad lead is sometimes that command chat, it's feast or famine. It's either constant chatter and you can't hear your guys, or everyone's dead silent and there's no coordination. Oh well, right? Your squad lead, I would say in either of those situations, make it clear that you guys are one of the defending squads. Ideally, a team, as a rule of thumb, is probably going to have 2 full-man defending squads. That makes the defense, I think, more likely to hold than if it's just one, because of the activities I'm going to suggest each do. I think if you have 2 defending squads that follow what I'm going to talk about, I think you have a very decent chance in pub play of winning a lot of your matches if most other things are close. So, squad lead is the communications node. They're one of the 2 people in the squad who can relay the recon reports, and again, marking maps, updating maps, and giving folks, particularly AT and other special role players, assignments when they're needed. That's what the squad lead has to do. And at a bare minimum, squad leaders should be updating OPs, building Garys, to foster those respawns. All right, my second and third recommendations for squad roles that have to be filled and probably should be filled by different people is the support player and the engineer. Support player, higher is generally better, but I'd say the level 3 loadout is quite good for what I have in mind. The engineer, honestly, the basic loadout that comes with engineer is necessary. And I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna pause here and just briefly rant about how many squads I'll go into these days and games I'll hop into, and I'll see no support player, no engineer player, but I'll see a medic and a rifleman, or 2 riflemen in lieu of these positions. If you want to shoot a rifle, you can still do that as a support player. It depends on the loadout, and as the engineer. So if that's what you want to do, but those 2 positions also give you a lot more flexibility and a lot more potential benefit to your team. So if you want to shoot rifles, you can still do that as an engineer. Though in this recommendation, this tutorial, the things I'm recommending for a good pub play defending squad, you ought to be asked to do more. Look, the support player is important. They're the other person who can talk about recon reports. If they're out sweeping some square with another group and that recon report shows anybody's up, they can communicate that to them, although they can't mark it. They're good to have. The obvious one is that they can drop supplies, and with the level 3, I think it's the level 3 loadout. They can also drop that precious explosive ammo, which is useful for lots of folks in the group. And I'd say they can also drop, well, they can also drop the regular ammo, which maybe the machine gunner, maybe if for some reason there's a medic in your squad and they have limited ammo and they've been just, popping off and so they need ammo, it might help them as well. But that explosive ammo is huge. That supply, that was 50 supplies, are huge. And remember, there's an overlap with the engineer, which is that the manpower node the engineer constructs for your squad ought to be at around the hard cap you are defending, so your support player can get those supplies and that ammo back even faster because it reduces by half the cooldown. All right, the engineer is, I think, also central to a defending squad. I think it's also essential to an attacking squad, but that's not this video. The engineer has a lot to do. It's not a bad idea for someone who is knowledgeable and maybe just cannot sit still and has to constantly keep doing things in a good active defending squad. The engineer will never be resting. Nodes got to go up, although I'm going to suggest when I close out this video that it's not just the engineer who builds nodes, but at a minimum the engineer has to have one of each of the 3 nodes up. And again, my recommendation is to bring the manpower node with you to whatever defensive cap you are defending. Second thing that should keep you busy as engineer, lay mines. I'm not trying to be whatever, but I am. But I'll, 30 minutes into a pub match, and there are 4 anti-personnel and 2 anti-tank mines, and it's me. I came in as the engineer. I respawned or something like that, or grabbed some explosive ammo that I may have had to lay down for myself. And that's it. Like the rest of the team, even with engineers, there are no mines down. I don't get this. It's super cool when you actually see somebody step on those landmines. They go flying. More practically, anti-personnel and anti-vehicle mines act as soft recon because as they're going down, you can tell where people are coming in and you're killing them as you do so, or you're making them expend grenades or time, whatever, in trying to avoid the consequences of those. But it's a great way to rack up some kills, and it will pair well with the other things you need to do, which is to build fortifications. And I think in general, what you're going to want to focus on is creating choke points and denying certain areas, and then layering the routes of, let's see if I get this right, ingress and egress, basically to and through. You want to load those up with mines, and hopefully there's some good cover that the rest of your squad mates and yourself can use to shoot at folks and then force them to come through those choke points that ought to be heavily mined on both sides. I would recommend, though, not laying a majority of your mines inside the hard cap, because when those bombing runs, artillery strikes, grenades, all the other fun stuff come in, it's likely going to detonate those mines. In a few places, yeah, it makes sense. If you got really good cohesion, I think the engineer and the squad, the support player, can frequently change roles, and they're going to kind of be doing things that might not immediately have them with the rest of the squad. I think that they can both maximize their number of anti-personnel landmines. You can have some inside the cap, but you really want them outside, telling you where the attackers are coming from, giving you that soft recon advantage. And they're just harder to destroy out there. All right, fortifications. Again, I think you want to focus on creating choke points and denying certain areas of attack. It just makes it easier for a limited number of defenders to concentrate their fire on a smaller area rather than a larger one. All right, I said you have a lot to do as engineer. Only a few times have I seen in pub matches vehicle repair stations built. And yet everyone loves it when armor comes up and helps them out. Particularly as the defending squad. Again, depending on the map, and there's a bias in the maps that they tend to be open. 1 or 2 pieces of armor that are able to clear at least the front and possibly a chunk of the flank is a huge boon to the defenders, who are mostly, as a defending squad, you're mostly focused on the area behind the hard cap relative to your enemy's side, and then you press out to the flanks from the rear, the kind of 6 o'clock area of the hard cap relative to your opponents. And so a vehicle repair station helps them should they take, an AT hit or, an enemy tank hit and they get to it. But get those up. I mean, if you're just need it to be about you can help your score in game. You're probably going to need to coordinate with the support person to get the supplies to do that, but it's not a bad idea. It doesn't take long to do. If those armor are near you and you have the loadout, the kind of basic loadout that allows you to repair armor, do it. It's much better to keep those guys in the fight, keep them rocking and rolling, and you guys just focus, the infantry focus on clearing out enemy AT, and then the rest is kind of on the armor guys to figure out for themselves. If you have the loadout, there are occasions where switching within the engineer class to get the satchel is going to be really, really helpful, so go ahead and do that. All right, the other position I would recommend, and maybe not everybody's on board with this, but I'd say take an anti-tank as kind of one of the required loadouts. There is an argument that maybe you could just do this as needed, but I think it ought to be there. This is one where it would be best to have the level 6 option available. The level 3 loadout and above is also great because you want to use those anti-tank mines to act as soft recon, but also to deny areas where enemy vehicles are likely to go. And then you can always switch to the ranged option as the AT player. But the level 6 and above is going to give you the option to build the rarely used anti-tank gun. Again, my view, pub play, I've rarely seen anti-tank guns constructed. Yeah, they consume munitions, so this is why you also want to help with the logistics and the resources stuff as much as possible. But anti-tank guns are good not just against vehicles, but they're also pretty devastating against infantry. And if you can get them at least a little bit of elevation into what you assume is coming your way, if you pair that with how engineers construct fortifications and creating choke points, your AT guns can more than pay for themselves. Again, you're probably going to have to work with the engineer. You may have to switch some roles to drop the supplies, get them in the right place, but go ahead and do it. And when you're back on the AT ranged options, bazookas, Panzerfaust, and so on, use those rockets when you need them. When you die, you're going to get more. And if your support person is dropping their explosive ammo, you'll be able to restock your AT rockets at least one time. And if multiple folks are willing to spend a brief time as engineer, drop explosive ammo, you can keep drawing from them. And you can use them against clumps of infantry as well. If you're about to die, why not use it up? All right, the last two spots are flex spots. So kind of whatever people want. I generally, I'll say in general, what you want to do is make sure that you have a range of weapons in the squad. If the first 4 roles have been filled with people who are generally good, I don't know, the weapons they have are generally long range rifles, then in your 2 flex spots, you're going to need to bolster things up and get some good close range weapons. And I think everybody probably likes a little bit the Grenadier Assault class, but you probably might need to downgrade. I think you need to take the lower of those rolls, or the highest one, which I think is like 9 or above, in order to get the automatic weapon. I think the Grenadier class is rifle. It doesn't matter. If you're that high, you can switch down to one with a high rate of fire. I like the automatic rifleman as at least one of the 2 spots. It's kind of just, it's not bad. It's got a decent rate of fire. It's got decent range, so it can do work at close range and at medium range as well. It doesn't require a whole lot of schooling in what you need to do, I would say, in the basic assault rifleman class. So those are 2 I would think about. If your first 4 slots happen to all be people with loadouts who have automatic weapons, then in these flex spots, then maybe the Grenadier Assault class, which I think has the rifle, is probably the right one. The automatic rifleman you may keep, you may swap out for a rifleman or something like that, and possibly a medic if you just have somebody who really likes playing it, but it's not one of my recommendations. All right, those are some of the roles I would suggest and what they're going to contribute. The last part of this here is what are you going to do? begin by reminding you that the first times you can get some stuff done is in the warm-up phase of the match. You know, some people just spend that time shooting in the air or team killing their friendlies or just, you know, doing whatever. But there is time there where your squad can get to work doing the things it ought to do. One of the things you can do is probably the most useful in this warm-up period is to have your non-engineer and support players spawn in as as support players. Drop supplies. If they have the explosive ammo, drop that too. Do it quickly, do it near the artillery, and then go ahead and respawn and choose the class that they're actually going to play in and have them move towards the transport trucks, assuming that they are around. I find that most decent transport truck drivers, they tend to leave the kind of HQ with about 45 seconds or so left to go in the pre-match warm-up. And so you do have some time to get those supplies down, to get some explosive ammo laid out. And what you do at the end of that, if several folks have done it, I would say have the support player, the person who's actually going to play support, probably use those supplies to construct nodes back around the artillery. That's going to help with the resources, and it's also going to provide some cover and concealment if your team happens to be using arty. When the map goes live, the engineer and the support player ought to make a beeline, however they have to, whether they got a truck or not, to the defensive cap. And assuming that the manpower node was one of the ones constructed back in arty, the support player's supplies should be down. If the commander isn't going there to put up a Gary, then the squad lead needs to go to that defensive cap, the kind of second cap forward, the one closest to the contested cap in the center. They need to put up a Gary there and then continue on to join the fight for center cap, where the other three members of the squad are, and they're going to have to use whatever other Garys are hopefully in place to respawn if they die in that initial contest. But the squad lead, as they come up, they can throw down an OP and get up other additional Garys as necessary. You should probably have 3 Garys set up that are there to support an attack on the center cap. If it goes well and you take it, those are now your defensive Garys or your fallback Garys, whatever you call them. While that contest is ongoing, that push can be very quick, it can be very slow. The support player and the engineer in the back are going to be working on fortifying the defensive cap. So, again, if all has gone well, there should also be supplies up now for the manpower node to be constructed by the actual engineer on the defensive cap. This will help the support person get their supplies back more quickly. The support player should lay down the additional ammo they have. The engineer should start laying both anti-personnel, anti-vehicle mines, can restock their ammo with the explosive ammo. They can then respawn and I think get 2 more. I think they're still allowed 6 anti-personnel mines and then I think 4 anti-tank as well. And then the engineer and support player can swap so that the support player, now engineer, can also put down mines. And this also enables the regular engineer to drop supplies and additional ammo for others, because the rest of the squad may be falling back if you lose the fight for center cap. Assuming now that there's at least 1 Gary in that defensive cap, the mines are starting to go up, and as time goes on, we'll see what happens in the battle over center cap. If it's won, then the engineer and support player need to kind of finish what they're doing and move up. I'd recommend, again, that they take down the manpower node that's on their current defensive cap and move it up to the next one. So that the support player, anybody who's going to play that support role, is able to get the supplies and ammo even faster. If they lose the battle for center cap, well, then the other 4 members of the squad that were contesting center cap are now going to fall back and do the things a defending squad does. With the center cap thing decided, the squad should fight as a squad from here on out. And this is just one of the most basic things that frequently doesn't happen in pub plays. You have 2 or 3 guys who are kind of off Ramboing, and so the squad has limited ability to do anything. You're together. You're either on center cap defending, or you're on the kind of second cap out, the one in front of your HQ. Here, start doing the rest of the things defending squads need to do. You need to be active. You need to be searching squares, probably at least 2 squares behind your hard cap, and then if you have another defending squad, figure out who's doing the right, who's doing the left, or above or below, whatever the cap looks like. Sweep behind them, and then sweep to the flank that is your responsibility. Stuff that's in front of the cap, I mean, you got teammates, like they got to do other things. Your attacking squad should be dealing with them. Your armor, if they're lined up even a somewhat defensive position, should be able to hit things well that are in front of them. But your job is to make sure that no AT gets behind your armor, and that you're knocking down Garys or OPs, you're hunting supply drops, you're hunting airheads, all the stuff that's going to fall behind the defensive cap. And if you had to fall back because you lost center cap, remember, you now need
somebody's on
at least 2 more Garys in addition to the one that should be there. Even though you're kind of close to your HQ, you don't want to get any closer. And so you want to have those Garys up. And again, this is for the supply person. This is for the commander. This is for people driving supply trucks to do. The anti-tank player, when the defensive cap has been established, ought to lay mines where they think it's most likely for enemy vehicles to move. Again, with a focus on the toughest things first. And the armor is probably going to be the toughest things. And if they have time to get up a AT gun in a decent position, even if it's not in a decent position, if they have an AT gun up and you know they've done the other things that they're supposed to do, go ahead and get it up. Use the ammo judiciously. You don't want to just be popping off, you know, and shooting down planes that you can't shoot down and stuff like that. But then you can switch to the ranged options, or you can go with the ambusher if you really like the satchel, and go around and do things as needed. And those 2 flex spots and the squad lead are constantly hunting, probably as a group of 3 folks who might be behind the cap. Engineer and support player are going to work on building up fortifications, building choke points, and then getting those mines down. All right, so that's it. It is constant activity, whatever the defensive cap is from here on out. Sweeping spawn points, laying down mines, creating choke points, and making sure you have folks in the right role. You should always be doing something. Some of this stuff is going to require you to respawn a lot. It's a lot of you looking at the respawn screen. I get that's not the most fun, but try having fun when you lose. It usually doesn't happen. I don't think it does. You'll always have something you could be doing. Final reminders, don't punch up in the hard cap. Just as I said, don't lay most of your mines in the hard cap, I would say usually, because they're going to get blown up when the big explosions come in. I've already said use mines several times. I guess it seems like a good thing to use, to close with here. They seem really underused. And the few times I've ever been killed by a mine, for the rest of that map, or maybe till I'm done playing that day, I am looking down far more than I used to. It's that kind of once bitten, twice shy phenomenon. And so rather than looking up at maybe your opponents are now looking down in those trenches to try not to, again, get blown up on the same mine. People seem to have some special hesitance against getting blown up by mines. They'll get killed by the same person running the same place 5 times in a row, but Lord knows they don't want to get blown up by an AP mine twice. So keep that in mind as well. If there are lulls in the fighting, say there was a big push by the enemy and you guys wiped them, got out all their spawns, there's an opportunity here for the non-engineer, non-support players to quickly take those positions, throw down mines, throw down supplies, throw down ammo, and then hop back onto their positions before the next attack gets underway. You can kind of reset yourselves, because frequently after these attacks, a lot of the mines have blown up for whatever reason, and it's time to refresh them. So that's it. That was not quick, but that is it for the pub play in Hell Let Loose. All right, folks, I hope this helped, and I hope to have the opportunity to bring you more of these in the